Good afternoon and welcome to Change Food Eats. I'm your host, Diane Hatz, and I'm here today to have a discussion about factory farming. It's an issue that's so important that people still don't know enough about. My guest today is Sonya Trom Eayrs. She's a farmer's daughter, rural advocate, attorney, and an advocate for rural America. Her family has been on the front lines fighting industrial agriculture for years. Encircled by 11 swine factory farms in a 3-mile radius of the Trom family farm in rural Minnesota, Sonya understands the damage that has been sustained to rural America by large multinational corporations. Along with family and other local citizens, Sonya founded Dodge County Concerned Citizens, a grassroots organization determined to fight corporate factory farms. Welcome, Sonya. So to start off, tell us, what are you eating today?
Thanks, Diane. Nice to see you again. It's been a few years. I am eating a little rhubarb raspberry jam on a cracker, and the rhubarb is from our garden in southern Minnesota.
Is it in season now, rhubarb?
No, it's not. So I always pick some rhubarb. We have a lot of rhubarb. So I always pick the rhubarb and then freeze it, and then I can have it throughout the year.
Oh, smart, smart. Okay, so let's start off with the question I'm asking everybody that I interview. How can we create a food system where everyone can eat healthy food?
Our food system is really a reflection of our values. And so I think that we have to ask ourselves, who are we? And what do we value? And then lastly, how do we intend to protect what we value? And our food system is a direct reflection of our value system.
That's so deep. I think we could have like 2 hours conversation just around that. But before we jump into our conversation today, which is going to be about industrial agriculture and factory farm and the effects of them, let's just talk about you. So you grew up on a farm. Tell us what that was like, where you came from, where you are. Like, just give us a little background.
So I grew up on the family farm, and our farm is in Dodge County, Minnesota, which is in southeastern Minnesota. This is a family farm, and I stress the word family because my grandparents moved onto the farm in 1925. Our farm is at the headwaters of the Cedar River. And when I was a child, my dad tiled the land and continued to tile it.
What does that mean? We don't know. Like city folk do not know what that means.
Well, think of it as an underground drainage system. So think of it as it's a series of like pipes under the water, but years ago they were made out of cement and now they're made out of plastic. And so it helps to drain the land. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to use the land. So
now, is that because you get a lot of rainfall where that farm is? Because I would assume in a desert you don't need that done, or do you?
No, you would not. And so it helps. It's a drainage system essentially, so that you can use the land. Because at the headwaters, you can imagine years ago it was very like bogs and cattails and that type of thing, and so very wet. And so the drainage system helps so you can actually use the land.
And what kind of farm did you go on?
So we have it's cash crop, and when I was a child we had cash crop meaning.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you again. What's cash crop?
Cash crop meaning corn and soybeans. Okay. So, and that's a rotation every other year, corn and soybeans, corn and soybeans. Some people do corn on corn. We never do that on our land. So it's corn and soybeans because one takes nitrogen out, the other one puts it back in.
But can I ask you a question? Because I know this is very common with most farmers, across the Midwest. How come not broccoli and tomatoes and spinach? Like, can you only earn money if, like, they're cash crops? Is that because you can make cash off them? Like, why corn and soy?
So, well, it's actually part of production agriculture, but like years ago, for example, we had the Owatonna Canning Company had, when I was a child, we had migrant camps, 2 migrant camps that were a mile and a half away from our farm. And they would raise crops like asparagus. And so, believe it or not, we still find wild asparagus in our road ditches.
Wow.
And, you know, that was 40 some years ago. But part of the problem is those are very labor intensive, you know, raising some of the crops like that.
Right, right. Okay, so that makes sense. So cash crop now, was that how it was when you were growing up? What type of farm growing up?
So when I was a very small child, we had a dairy operation, and my dad had dairy cows. And we maybe had 20 to 30 dairy cows. And he sold the cows when I was just a small child, so maybe 1964, when he sold the cows, because you know, there was a time period during the 1960s where there was a farming organization called NFO, and NFO was National Farmers Organization, and the farmers were upset about the prices they were receiving, and they dumped milk. And
Right.
my father was like, you know, you can't provide for your family when you can't get an income, and you weren't being paid a decent income.
So you left the farm, became an attorney, came back to the farm. Tell us about what happened there.
So left the farm in 1977, left for college with my red typewriter.
The manual?
It was actually electric. I thought I was pretty special.
You were.
So, and got on a plane and went out to Poughkeepsie, New York, and went to Vassar College. And then actually transferred, finished at Carleton College. I couldn't stand the fact that I was missing fall harvest so much. And so transferred and finished at Carleton, but I've always had a close connection, always had a very close connection with my family. And and a year ago, my father passed away at age 90. And so
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So I've taken over operation of the farm with one of my brothers. So we're involved in the day-to-day activities of planting and harvesting and everything else that in between.
So let's talk about the everything else. Our focus today is on factory farming. So can you explain to viewers what a factory farm or a CAFO is?
So a CAFO is a confined animal feeding operation. And essentially these are animals that are raised in a concentrated, there's a reason they use that word. So these are high density facilities. They're about the size of a football field, and they have to be built to industry specifications. Typically there are 2,400 pigs in one of these buildings. And what's very different about the way that pigs are raised today, typically, you know, pigs were raised outdoors and they could roll around in the mud and so forth, but pigs today are raised in these confinement facilities, and there's a slatted flooring in the facility, and underneath is a manure pit, an 8-foot manure pit that holds over 1 million gallons worth of manure. And so all of that manure goes into the manure pit, and they pump that manure pit out once a year.
And then what do they do with that? All that. I can't even begin. We'll get into the smell and the effects of it. I just thinking of that many hogs in an indoor space with concrete slatted floors, just pooping into how many gallon manure pit?
Over 1 million, 1.1 million gallons of manure. But you see, it's not just one building, it's typically at least 2 buildings, and sometimes you drive by and you'll see 5 or 6 different buildings right in a row. And so they might have 7,000 to 10,000 hogs in one factory farm.
Okay, so then what happens with that manure? So that's a heck of a lot of manure.
That manure is spread onto the land. What we notice is that oftentimes that manure is spread at night. No one knows where it's being spread. You don't know how much is being spread on the land. We did an audit in Dodge County. We have 234 registered feedlots in the county, and we did an audit to find out how many manure management plans were on file, and discovered that of the 234 feedlots, only 37 manure management plans were on file.
How did they get away with that?
Well, the fox is in charge of the chicken house. That's the easy answer.
Not a New York City slogan, but I love it.
But you get it, right?
Totally get it. So let's talk about this. What happens, and this is something a lot of people don't realize. I mean, you live in a rural area and you live on well water, like you drink water from a well, correct? Like,
Correct.
How does it affect that? And this is water you're tap in your kitchen. I know to you it's just what you do, but to a lot of people, you know, I'm in a city, it comes through a pipe and I filter it. Like, I don't know where it's coming from.
Right.
But explain like water wells and what's happening and how the manure and the factory farms affect wells.
So the manure is high in nitrates. It's also high in phosphorus, but it's the nitrates that are particularly dangerous. And the nitrates are supposed to be under 10 milligrams per liter. And so, you know, farms, you don't have a common well system with your neighbors, right? You have your own individual private well. And so, for example, our farm is on the south end of the county, and my husband's, his family, their farm is on the north end of the county. We take water to the Eayrs farm every single time we go to the farm because of the high nitrates. There's a swine factory farm just a stone's throw from their farm, and they've had really serious problems with high nitrates. The numbers are coming in 25, 26 milligrams per liter, almost 2.5 times the state standard.
Now, can you taste, like if I didn't know and I bought a house and moved to the area, can you taste it? Do you just have to know to get your water tested?
You know to get your water tested.
Wow, that's scary.
I mean, you should know to get your water tested.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I think some people wouldn't. If I moved from New York City out to rural Minnesota, I wouldn't think about that.
No. And the problem too is that like the wells that are dug for these factory farms are going in several hundred feet deep, but the wells that have been in place for many years, you know, are maybe 70 to 100 feet deep. Well, so I suppose we could solve the problem by digging a deeper well, but how long can you dig a deeper well to solve your problems? Right.
So what about, I mean, isn't hydrogen sulfide a problem, like with air pollution? Is that and manure particulates in the air? Like what's the effect on the local air quality?
So there are a number of very dangerous gases that are emitted from these facilities, including hydrogen sulfide, methane, ammonia, and other particulates. And so we have 11 swine factory farms in a 3-mile radius of our farm.
And can you just, because I saw that as I was prepping to speak with you, you have 11 hog farms, but or hog operation, is it like 11 with 3 to 4 of those massive barns each? Or is it 11, like 11, it sounds like it's
11, most of which are like 11, 2,400. Usually the standard is 2,400 hogs per building. So it's 11, 2,400 hog buildings. So it's 25 to 30,000 pigs in a 3-mile radius.
And again, because I did some anti-factory farm work many years ago, how did they get away with it? Like how did it happen? Like, and I understand there's people like you who try to, I don't even want to say fight, who try to stand up for what should be done, but how did they get away with 11 swine farms within 3 miles?
The easy answer is easy permitting. So in Dodge County and in a lot of Minnesota counties, it's a 2-step process. And so the first step is there is a planning commission, and the planning commission is a recommending body. And then from there it goes to the Dodge County Board of Commissioners. Well, in Dodge County, the planning commission is stacked with registered feedlot operators or farm bureau members. And so when we fought the 11th swine factory farm, 5 of the 7 planning commission members were registered feedlot operators. So again, you know, the fox is in charge of the chicken house, and that's, you know, it's easy permitting when you stack the deck.
So your group is called Dodge County Concerned Citizens. How did the group come about, and tell us a little bit about that?
Oops, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, tell us about Dodge County, Concerned Citizens. Tell us about your group.
So we have a grassroots organization, and which has been kind of mobilized for the past 20 years or so, and initially mobilized because back in the early 2001, 2002, we were fighting installation of what would have been the largest dairy factory farm in the state of Minnesota at the time, and that was going to be just 2 or 3 miles north of our farm. And so the neighbors got together and formed a citizens group, and believe it or not, we're successful in fighting back that operation.
So you do. There are times when you do win. I don't want to put it in this terms, but you are able to hold them off because they probably just permitted somewhere else.
Yes, yes. And, you know, this is a game of whack-a-mole with the industry, because the industry is always looking for the next place where they can put another factory farm, and it's always the sneak attack. That's kind of their signature tactic to force these factory farms into areas. I can't tell you how many calls I've received from families. In fact, I had one just the other day, panicked because another factory farm is being proposed, and the neighbors receive bare minimum notice.
Wow.
And yet this project has probably been underway and in planning stages, oftentimes for as much as 2 years.
Wow. So I've heard that intimidation seems to be a common tactic from these large operations, or the people that these operations hire. So have you ever experienced any types of intimidation, and can you give us some examples?
So the intimidation is part of the business plan to force these factory farms into rural areas. And so we have put up with, people have no idea really how serious things are in rural America and what we're putting up with as far as the industry coming in. But we've dealt with things such as bullet holes in the stop sign just a few hours after my brother and I were in the field pulling out weeds. Pure Roundup that was sprayed on the corn and caused thousands and thousands of dollars in damage.
Now, explain how that damages the corn.
The Roundup?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was sprayed onto the cornfield, and because it kills weeds and so forth. So it kills anything. I mean, Roundup is a powerful chemical and just kills anything in its path. And so, I mean, this whole swath that was sprayed with pure Roundup was probably a half a mile long by maybe 30 to 40 feet deep.
Wow.
I mean, extensive damage. And then the other thing we've dealt with is constant garbage in our road ditches. I've had to deal with false police reports, false police calls to the local sheriff's department, sheriff's office. So I've dealt with those calls, and those are calls that are not to report some kind of illegal activity, but to put heat on me and get me to shut up.
Right.
But the other thing that happens is very subtle. Local people in these local communities are afraid to speak out because their jobs are threatened, their businesses are threatened. You know, a lot of the intimidation, for example, that we are finally seeing on a national level. You're finally seeing it in places like New York City. This has all been perfected in rural areas for years. And we're finally seeing it on a national level.
Do you have any ideas on what could be done about it, or what could be done to try to curb it?
I think we have to keep speaking out. You know, we have connected with a number of citizen groups across the Midwest, and I can give you names, telephone numbers of other farm families who are on the front lines fighting industrial ag, and we all have the same stories. It's the same tactics. It's just a different state and a different community where these tactics and what's occurring.
So we'll be right back with our guest today, Sonya Trom Eayrs from Dodge County Concerned Citizens. But right now, it's time for our health and wellness expert, Ebeth Johnson. Today, she's talking about the incredible edible egg, the incredible edible versatile egg, what to buy, how to prepare. So many yummy things are in store. So you can always follow Ebeth at Delicious Living with Ebeth. It's all yours, chef.
Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Ebeth Johnson, your mindful eating coach and wellness mentor. Today I'm so happy to let you know that eggs are incredible and edible once again. Woo! If you are an egg lover like me, this is a great news. The only question we need to ask ourselves now is, which egg is the best egg? First, let's talk color. The difference in color of an egg's shell is determined only by the breed of chicken that laid the egg. The color of the shell doesn't have any impact on the nutrition quality or the taste. So you can pick whatever color egg resonates with you. Now, what about living conditions? Labels for this include free range, cage-free, and pasture-raised. But sadly, none of these terms are regulated by the USDA or the FDA, and these terms might not be all they're cracked up to be. Let's explore what these terms mean, what they don't mean, and how to choose the most incredible egg. Cage-free means the chickens are not held in cages, but it does not guarantee that the chickens have access to the outdoors or natural light. Cage-free hens could still be crammed into a barn without room to move. Now, free range means the chickens have to have access to the outdoors, and once they're outside, they have to have between 1 and 2 square feet of space per chicken. Free range does not necessarily mean that the access door is large and easily accessible, and unfortunately, it doesn't guarantee that the outdoors is a grassy pasture. It could just as likely be a cement block. Pasture-raised means the chickens were raised in a way that's consistent with how they would naturally live, in a pasture with the ability to freely roam, to scratch and peck, and that they also have a covered shelter that they can use to protect themselves against unpleasant weather and predators. Finally, let's talk organic. To qualify as organic, the eggs come from chickens that were only fed organic feed with no animal byproducts, synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, or chemical additives. No genetically modified foods were used. And finally, the chickens are raised in a cage-free environment with access to the outdoors. So which egg is the best? When it comes to buying eggs at the grocery store, my recommendation is to choose eggs labeled pasture-raised and organic whenever possible. And because the USDA and FDA don't regulate the terms free-range, cage-free, and pasture-raised, I encourage you to look for eggs that have been rated by the Global Animal Partnership, an independent organization that rates how humanely animals are raised around the world. When it comes to eating and enjoying eggs, instead of serving them alongside traditional bacon or sausage or toast or grits, I want to encourage you to serve them alongside some colorful and seasonal vegetables. If you scramble them, make an omelet or a frittata, think of the eggs as a binder for all those amazing veggies, where the vegetables take center stage and the eggs are a flavorful backdrop. If you serve boiled eggs or sunny side up or fried eggs, fill half your plate with beautiful, colorful vegetables and then serve 2 eggs alongside. 2 eggs is the serving for 1 adult. So here is to loving incredible and edible eggs again. I'm Ebeth Johnson, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, Chef Ebeth. So you can follow her on Facebook at Delicious Living with Ebeth. And now let's get back to our guest today, Sonya Trom Eayrs from Dodge County Concerned Citizens. Sonya, we were talking about intimidation and things, it's just so depressing, things that happen to people in rural America who try to stand up or stop an industrial operation from coming in. So how can we make people really understand how bad these operations are? and how they impact people. Like what are some things, let's say I could do, or somebody, you know, somebody with a blog could do, like what could people do to help raise awareness, more awareness about this?
Yeah, I think a simple thing people can do is like, just get in your car. People are driving, right? This summer, you know, they're not flying in airplanes. Get in your car. If you want to, you know, this is eye-opening. And drive across Interstate 90 in southern Minnesota. And we have, there are 3 large meat processing plants right along I-90. You have Hormel Corporation in Austin, Minnesota. That's world headquarters. You drive a little further west to Worthington, Minnesota, and that's a large JBS facility. JBS is Brazilian owned. And then you just cross into the South Dakota and into Sioux Falls. And Smithfield, which is owned by the Chinese, has another huge meat processing plant. But all along the way on that freeway, you can see swine factory farms on both sides of the road. And when you hit Martin County, when you hit the Martin County line, it's an explosion. And if you really want to get an eye-opening, go into the state of Iowa. I mean, Iowa is referred to as a sacrifice state. The industry has ruined Iowa. Some of these areas look like a nuclear bomb hit. There are no trees, there are no houses, there are no farm buildings. It's just these ugly factory farms.
Wow. So I've heard and read a couple places, people talking about with coronavirus and the pandemic that we're going through right now, that, you know, it came, I don't know if it's been completely agreed upon, but most people assume it came from a wet market in China, which is, you know, meat. But is there a correlation, or do you think there's some type of correlation between the way these hog operations are and us possibly having a pandemic, another pandemic that starts in a factory farm or CAFO?
I don't pretend to be an expert in this area, but I read extensively with respect to factory farms and what the experts are saying. And Sonya is an expert in this area. She wrote a book called Pandemic. There's also another writer, I think it's Rob Wallace. He's an evolutionary biologist, and he wrote a book recently also stating that factory farms are an explosive evolutionary accelerant. And so I think, to be honest, I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I think we're going to see more pandemics during our lifetimes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Because these factory farms are the perfect breeding ground.
I just have to stop for a second. You said explosive evolutionary accelerant?
Yes.
It's a great name for a band, but what exactly does that term mean?
For factory farms?
Yes.
That essentially that they have the capacity to incubate new viruses.
Oh.
So it's, you know, it's like a little lab.
So,
it's incubating these new viruses.
So with, you know, let's say with this, with new viruses, with the pollution, with all the problems, why do proponents of factory farms think they're necessary? Why do they? And I don't want to hear, you know, get bigger. I mean, you can tell me, but the whole we have to be bigger. The Industrial Revolution is over. If you don't know that yet, folks, no more Industrial Revolution. We are in, I heard a Native American call it a restorative generation, or regenerative is what people in food and farming are saying. But why do proponents of factory farms think they're necessary?
I think there's 2 different types of proponents. I think that there are corporate proponents, and I think that there are also contract growers who are proponents, the farmers.
You have to explain what a contract grower is.
Okay.
What is a contract grower?
So I'll go back though, but from a corporate proponent, you have to understand that, I mean, our meat supply is in the hands of just a few multinational corporations. And so this is essentially a pyramid scheme. And that pyramid scheme has the meat packers at the top. The middle tier is called an integrator. The integrators own the pigs, and they have the gestational facilities. And then the bottom tier is the contract growers.
So what would an example of an integrator be? Like is Purdue an integrator? Like who I don't know, who's Smithfield? Is that an integrator? Or do they own the whole
meat
process?
packer at the top. So the meat packers at the top would be companies such as Hormel, JBS, Smithfield, Tyson Foods, Purdue. Those are all the big meat packers at the top of the pyramid.
Okay.
Integrators would be, here in Minnesota, would be companies such as Holden Farms, Christensen Farms, Schwartz Farms, Pipestone Systems. These are all middle tier integrators, and they own the pigs. And so if I want to get...
But do they then contract to small farmers?
Yes, and they have hundreds. If you look up their websites, look up Holden Farms, for example. I think Holden Farms has something like 200 contract growers. And Christensen Farms has over 1,500 contract growers.
Now, do you know the difference between like a Holden Farms and a Nyman Ranch? Because from what I understand, Nyman Ranch, I interviewed Paul Willis last week from Nyman Ranch, is that the farmers own the hogs and that Nyman buys them from them. But you're saying with these integrators that even though they contract with small factory farms, that larger company owns the hogs, not the farmer?
That's correct.
Yeah, I don't think many people realize that.
So if you are a contract grower, you're basically paid to do all the work, but you do not own the animals. And so here, I'll give you an example. My brother-in-law, Dave, and my sister, Shelley, farmed for many years. And Dave farmed with his dad, Frank, just outside our hometown of Blooming Prairie. Dave and Frank owned their own pigs. They were independents. So as independents, they owned their own pigs. They would take their pigs to market. And so they'd head down to Hormel in Austin. And they noticed, this is in the mid-90s, that the wait times were getting longer and longer. Because wait times for delivery. And so the meat packers were put pressure, kind of false pressure on these independents, and wouldn't take their animals into the facility immediately. In the meantime, independents sit and wait in line. In the meantime, their animals are dropping weight. But they're taking through big semi-loads of hogs that are coming in from factory farms, because they started these factory farms in the 90s. So they anchored certain factory farms throughout Minnesota, like especially in southern Minnesota.
Wow.
And then in 1998, with Dave and his dad, Frank, 1998 was the breaking point, because the bank said, we're not going to renew your small loan, but we'll give you a great big loan if you build a factory farm and you take your pigs from an integrator such as Holden Farms or Christensen Farms, and you sign a contract. So they had them over a barrel. And
okay, so I want to stop and I want to just bold this section, because I think a lot of people aren't going to grasp what you just said. You're saying that your family farmers went to the bank to get a loan. They could not get it unless they became a contract factory farm grower.
That's correct.
Now, do you know, because I have heard that banks were in on it, how did banks start? I'm trying to think of a way to frame it, but how did banks get in this? How come the banks, you think a rural bank in a rural area, it's going to be like neighbors and stuff. What happened that the banks started basically forcing these farmers to become factory farm operators?
I wish I knew the exact answer to that. I mean, I suspect that if I'm inside a bank and I can see that there's a significant change that's occurring, this is a huge transformation in rural areas. That
But
you're going to change your lending practices. But I also, I mean, I assume that probably farm credit services, I mean, I think this goes back to our lending policy in this country, which is through farm credit services.
So, and I also want to go back a little bit further when you talked about becoming a contract grower. So these larger they're not farms, they call themselves farms. These integrators that call themselves farms, but they're not farms people.
No.
Right. So they're contracting with a actual small farmer, forcing them to do these industrial practices. So this larger integrator owns the hog. Who owns the manure? Who owns the pig poop?
That's a great question. You know who owns the manure? That's one of their selling points. The farmer. Oh, you get the manure. And they sell them on it and tell them that's really valuable. Because they can turn around and sell the manure.
I guess where I'm confused, they're selling it as an upside. I only see it as a downside, because isn't there the problem when there's so many hogs that it's not just fertilizer, it's runoff, like it's pollution.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
so they're just selling it. They're just selling it.
Yes.
Like,
and some of these counties, for example, like Martin County in southwestern Minnesota, way over capacity in terms of nitrate overload. I mean, there's too much manure and they don't have enough land.
Okay, so nitrate overload, because people aren't going to understand these terms. Nitrate overload means just basically too much poop is on the land and there's too many nitrates.
Yep. I wish I could take someone out and show you how they spread this manure on the land. You would be shocked. They're supposed to knife it in. It's not always knifed into the ground.
No, I've seen photos of just like cannons spraying it in the air, and it goes on people's laundry, it catches in the wind, but would you be willing to the I-90, those roads, would you be willing if we gave you a map after you can sort of plot out some road trips, and maybe we could promote a little factory farm road trip for people who might be going out on the road. Check out the fall foliage in the northern states, but also check out the factory farms while you're there. Because I do agree with you. I think you need to actually smell it and witness it to really understand how bad it is. So do you have any idea? So you have your group, Dodge County Concerned Citizens. And I have to say, because I know there have been small grassroots groups for decades that have been trying to hold factory farms accountable and stop them from coming in. With the pandemic, in where I am in New York City and all over the world, they call them mutual aid. Some are official mutual aid, but all these groups, like I started a group in the East Village because the city couldn't come in time. We organized, we bought food for people who needed it. We deliver food. We'll walk dogs for people who were sick. Like we would do anything to help our neighbors. And this is now going to go on indefinitely. Like I'm sad to say I've lived for 30 years. I now have more friends than I did in the past 30 years because I've met so many people during the pandemic trying to help. But I'm relating that because I never thought about the connection. I feel like groups like yours are the original sort of mutual aid, maybe not the original, but one of the first mutual aid networks that have started that people just don't know about. So are there other groups like you? Like talk a bit about organizing groups, what groups do, where they're located. What if I'm in Texas and I want to try to find a local group? Like how does one find it? Like just talk a little bit about other groups and do you guys organize together?
So Dodge County Concerned Citizens is, to be honest, it's a small group, very small group. But I think that our strength is the fact that we've been able to connect with a number of other groups. We just don't have the citizen power to do what really needs to be done. But there are a number of groups. For example, probably the strongest group in Minnesota is an organization called Land Stewardship Project, LSP.
Oh, they're great. Yeah, they're great.
They do wonderful work. In Iowa, there's Iowa CCI.
Right.
That's a Citizens Alliance. and they're doing wonderful work. In Wisconsin, there's Sustain Rural Wisconsin Network. In the Dakotas, there's a group called Dakota Resource Council.
Oh, right.
So another organization that does fabulous work is SRAP. It's Socially Responsible Agricultural Project. And I think you're familiar with that group.
You know, I know everyone who watches this show is gonna be like, Diane knows everyone on the show. Yes, I have to get one or two of them on here at some point. But yes, I have known them for a very long time.
So SRAP does great work. So those are kind of grassroots organizations. Another group that's doing RAFI, R-A-F-I, they're in North Carolina.
The Rural Advancement Foundation International?
I can't remember what they're,
That's
you know
okay.
what? I can't
Sorry,
remember the
RAFI.
acronym.
Yeah, sorry, RAFI. It's R-A-F-I.
Another group would be, from a marketing standpoint, from a monopoly standpoint, because there's a lot of attention being paid now to the fact that these are monopolies, and pushing back and trying to get the Department of Justice involved with respect to these meat monopolies. And a group that's doing a lot of work in that area is OCM, that's Organization for Competitive Markets.
Okay, so that's fantastic. I think one of the challenges with the food movement is that we're dispersed and we're so localized, and it's not the easy. You can't go to one place that I know of. Maybe Food and Water Watch, because I know they have a map of factory farms. Yeah. So everybody, the best thing is to go to Food and Water Watch if you're trying to find a particular information about a particular area, because I know they have a map and you can click in and you can see how many CAFOs are in the area.
Yes. And
I'm sure they have connections, and they have, I think at this point they have reps all over the country, and they can also connect you with someone in your area.
You know, another group too, Diane, is Environmental Working Group.
Right.
And they just finished work earlier this year in Minnesota. They have an interactive map too. That's a really interesting map that shows all of the factory farms in Minnesota.
Really?
Yeah.
I know that Ken Cook, who's the head of Environmental Working Group, spoke. I did TEDx Manhattan, so he spoke at my first one. And they have not an interactive map, they have a map of who gets farm subsidies, and the amount of people that live in New York City, in Manhattan, getting farm subsidies is appalling. It's appalling. Yes, so many people in this city are not farmers, and they're getting subsidies. But anyway, okay, we're depressing ourselves. So one of the reasons I moved, because if people don't know, I started off doing anti-factory farm work. One of the reasons I moved into promoting sustainables, because you and people like you, Sonya, are icons to me. Like I have so much admiration for the work you do, because it's scary, it's depressing, it's an unending uphill. I do think it's an ending battle, but I can't thank you enough for doing what you do.
Thank you.
So my next question, what do you think about the trend toward plant-based and how that affects or will be affecting factory farms? Do you think that's helping minimize?
I think it's a threat to the industry.
Which industry?
Like big meat. I think that they're concerned about this movement. If you look at the NPPC website, which is the National Pork Producers Council, that's the National Trade Association for the pork industry. They have references to plant-based. I mean, this is one of the initiatives that they fight.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, it's kind of rather interesting to look at their website.
Well, see, my whole take is, because I've been vegetarian for 32 years. I do not believe in forcing my beliefs, feelings, or eating habits on anyone else. I think that if you're eating meat, you should eat pasture-raised meat. So I think there's a lot of room for getting out corporate ag with this plant-based movement and telling people if you're going to eat meat. Because a lot of people who are plant-based, it's like a few days a week or 5 days a week, but they're still eating some meat just to eat pasture-raised, better quality type of meat. Now, do you know, let's say, I wanted to go get some bacon. How do you know how to buy the right food? Like, how do you know that something is not factory farmed?
That's a great question. You have to know your supplier. So I purchase meat here from one of the meat lockers it's a small meat locker. It's actually in Minneapolis, just off the downtown.
Okay,
So
and I'm
I'll buy
sorry.
meat there.
Meat locker is I think that's it's a term for certain areas. Is it like a CSA? Is it like a?
No,
is
it's
it
a small.
farm?
They just basically they just sell meat, but it's all.
But it's not a butcher shop.
It's a butcher shop.
Okay.
So I go to a local butcher shop and I ask them specifically, like, who sourced this meat? Where did you obtain it? So I will go there because I know I can trust that source. There's another restaurant that I go to that has not only you can sit down and dine there, but they also sell meat products. And so that's another one that I trust. Or I go to the butcher shop in southern Minnesota when I'm there because I can trust a couple of the local butcher shops. The problem is we need more local butcher shops.
Yeah. And processing plants, but we can't get into that today.
Yeah, that's a whole nother discussion.
I know. So, how can people learn more about you? And I heard a rumor someone, and it's not me, is writing a book. So give us a little information on like what you're doing and how people could stay in touch with you.
So Dodge County Concerned Citizens, we have a website. It's dodgecc.org. We also have a Facebook page. We have a newsletter. If anyone's interested, we're happy to add them to the newsletter.
And can they find that information on your website about the newsletter?
They can find that not on the Facebook, on the web. Yes, on the website. Yep. So we'll be happy to add them. Then the email address is there, and they can send us an email. We're happy to add them. And this isn't fancy, folks. This is kind of homegrown.
It's punk. It's old school, man. It's all coming back. I just sold a bunch of records and stuff to this old school vinyl record shop up the road, and fanzines. I did a fanzine when I was a teenager, and fanzines are totally in, man. So you're cool what you're doing. Grassroots punk style newsletter.
Well, we could use some help in that area. So trust me, we need some help. But I have to tell you, we have a unique, we've been in a unique position because we've had a front row seat to the transformative, the destructive impact of industrial agriculture. We've had a front row seat for years. We know how this operates. We know all the tactics. And frankly, I think we know more about it than some of the contract growers who have signed on the dotted line. They really don't understand what they've signed up, what they signed up for. But I've had several friends who have pushed me and said, you really need to sit down and write a book. And so I'm doing so. So it's been cathartic because I have to tell you, this has been a very painful journey. But it's been very cathartic. It's helped me to kind of help connect the dots, and hopefully if I finish this and find a publisher or a literary agent,
when you finish and when you find the agent.
Yeah. So, but there is a story, and people need to understand that we basically have two food systems in this country, but they need to understand the bigger picture, which is this is the corporatization of rural America. And we cannot afford as a country to have our food supply in the hands of just a few multinational corporations. This is a huge issue in terms of our public safety.
Yeah, I think you just gave me my idea for my next segment. Like, we have our health and wellness segment that we just aired a bit, but I think I'm going to do a rural America factory farm segment. I'm going to have different people do like 5-minute videos on the ground showing people what the operations are like, what the manure is like, because I think that might help. It's hard because we're talking in a sense theoretically about it. I think people really need to see what you're saying also. So anyway,
Yes.
I'll keep you in the
Yes.
loop on that. So Sonya
Yep.
has a book coming out. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we go?
I think, if folks are going to get in their cars or their RVs or whatever they're driving, get off the road and drive through some of these small towns. The industry has hollowed out these rural communities, and they're nothing more than corporate outposts for corporate America. And it's really tragic. I mean, we're seeing, high schools are closing, businesses are closing. My husband's hometown, the last business to open, a funeral home. So when they're done burying the dead, who's going to bury that town?
Okay, Sonya, we're going to end on a positive note. So with the pandemic and the fact that there are people talking about New York City becoming like a waste, a lot of people are leaving New York. I don't want to put it in bad terms, but rural areas might be getting a lot more people soon, because I know people are moving. But I do think it's important that we all realize, as you hear with the pandemic, but even with this issue with hog farming, we're all in this together. So I can't thank you enough, Sonya. Everyone, please stay in touch with her and the work she's doing. And we'll also, in the description, wherever you're watching this, we'll try to put more information about how you can get involved and how you can learn more about factory farming. So thank you, Sonya.
Thank you.
And a huge thank you to our guest today, Sonya Trom Eayrs from Dodge County Concerned Citizens. What an intense discussion. There's still so much going on with factory farms and so much we still need to learn. And we need to figure out more ways that we can help people who are dealing with this horrific reality. So that concludes today's show. If you haven't heard yet, we are doing interviews with experts like Sonya on the first and third Tuesday of every month. And our next interview will be with Jimmy Carbone. If you don't know Jimmy, you will, and he's an amazing character. That will air on October 6th, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, here on Facebook, as well as on Instagram Live and also on YouTube. So everyone, eat well and stay safe. Thank you.